Hello again, and welcome to Winning with the Wrangler. Here at Dick Powell's Leadership Corner, brought to you by Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, Training and Development, where our passion is building leaders of today and tomorrow. Leaders, before we get started, remember that I collect information from, many different people in many different places. So if you hear yourself in our conversation today, please remember it is not all about you. Now, when you know that you're ready to have me come out to your location and do a leadership seminar or just tell a story, you need to give us a call, 727-422-1833, or go to the website, dick@ewfw.org, and get on our calendar as quick as you can because we, fill up very quickly. Now, today's topic, I'm going to be quite honest with you, is one that seems to be reoccurring more and more. What I hear all the time in every place I go and from almost every person, but what disturbs me the most is when I hear it on Sunday morning. Fear. F-E-A-R. Fear. You see, in the dictionary, it says that fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm afeared of some things, especially if I'm in Alaska and I'm fishing and there's, bears in the neighborhood. I'm really kind of cautious. But I'm not afraid to go out and live my life. You see, the thing about fear is it strangles you. And when I talk to people about taking a risk, they automatically, their fear piece goes up so high in them that they're just held in that spot. One of my good friends has been held in this fear for the last number of years after a traumatic breakup. But he's been held there, and he just can't seem to break loose and take the risk. And risk is, messy sometimes. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. But to live your life in fear is to not take and tell you about. Okay, let's take and calm down just a second. Okay? Fear. In today's atmosphere, I hear the word, I'm not kidding you, I hear it a lot. As I listened to, the speaker on Sunday morning, that I realized that his entire choice of lecture methods was to take and be fear-based. Fear of self, fear of significant others, fear of local happenings, fear of the global arena, and fear of life even ever after. Everything that this person said was to be fearful. I'm telling you, that's just not a way to live your life. It'll eat you up from the inside out. But I'm going to give you some of my personal thoughts. To fear, one must be in the rhetoric of those in power. Now, I want you to think about that. How much of that rhetoric happens? How much are you listening to? How much are you reading? How much are you absorbing from those around you? Are they bringing fear into your life? Is it helping or is it hindering? And I want you to really put some time and thought into that. In order to move beyond fear, though, I'm going to encourage you to invest in yourself, to learn and accept your choices. In my world, we are all, I'm not going to say equal, but I'm going to say we have the same opportunities to make choices. And choices really do rule our lives. And that is nothing to be fearful for. You see, the difference is to be accountable. And to be accountable for ourselves. And then and only then can we move ourselves and those around us forward. You see, this personal accountability and personal leadership that I've talked about for the last 40 years, I think that people just are afraid of it. You see, when you take accountability for yourself and for your choices, that means you have to be accountable for things that, well, the good ones, well, how about the bad ones? Well, you know what? Sometimes you can't learn to make good choices until you make bad choices. The unfortunate part about that is maybe you didn't look around or watch other people make those same bad choices. Now, I grew up in a pretty large family. There was 4 children. I was the last one born, and I was expected to learn from my siblings their misgivings and their bad choices. That didn't mean that I was not able to make those bad choices. It meant that I really got to see some of those bad choices play out in front of me and not do those. It meant that I learned from others. You know, what I found out is that ongoing continuous learning, the more I read, the more I learned, the more I associated with people who were willing to take a risk and be accountable for both the good and bad choices. Be personally accountable. I found that I was really surrounding myself with people who were great leaders. And that's something that I found they were not fearful of making a choice. I didn't find them fearful of most anything except maybe a spider or a poisonous snake. But I saw them take the time to discern and think about things before they made the final choice. You know, I used to love that show where they ask somebody a question and they'd say, "Is that your final answer?" And you would see the fear raise up on the person's face. You see, they weren't really afraid of failing. They were afraid of being accountable. And that, my friends, is really where we get stuck and not being able to move forward. And that's the accountability factor. Here at Earth, Wind, Fire, Water Training and Development, one of the things we really work on with people is that ability to be accountable for those choices. And when you're accountable, I think it takes away the fear. It takes away that peace. And if you're living this way, first of all, I'm going to encourage you to find people who aren't that way, to stand around, to be a part of. That's going to be what's going to push you forward. And if you're like me, sometimes you get wound up with people who seem to always speak in fear. You have to wonder what's going on in their world, in their life, that you can be a help and a mentor to help bring them out of that fearful state and get them into the real world again. Now, this really brings me to the next part of this subject. You see, I'm not fearful about most anything, but there are some things that kind of put the scare into me. And one of the scares that I've kind of felt in the last number of years, and especially right now, is the fear of the organizations that once stood for something now have become so wishy-washy that they are not, well, they don't seem like they'll stay, they're so wishy-washy they accept everything. I don't understand that. When there are no rules and no real guidelines, the question becomes, how does civilization stand and move forward? What are your perimeters? What are your guidelines? Where are they? Now, I'm going to tell you that a lot of these are personal values and morals and values and guidelines that we each choose to live our lives by. I grew up in an organization that really every week we repeated together the 12 points, and those 12 points became the way I lived my life. I'm in my late 60s, and I can tell you that I still am living my life by those 12 points. Even though that organization now has, well, slipped because of trying to please everyone. Now, I understand that I'm just one person, and I do not believe that I'm the only person who seeks some kind of guidance as to what's right and what's wrong. You see, I was kind of fortunate in a way to live in a family who, well, needed to place me somewhere else with my grandma, my grandpa. And my grandfather really raised me for those first 11 years. And the thing about that is there was a real set of guidelines. They were, I'm going to say, moldable to situations sometimes, but I always knew which was right and which was wrong. And there was very little gray area in there. Now I noticed that there's only thing left is gray area. There's no right, there's no wrong, it's all gray. And I see people struggling, especially young people today, struggling with that. Where am I? What am I supposed to do? What is right? What's wrong? What's up? What's down? And they're stuck in this limbo. And now I'm seeing people my age who are going, gosh, I don't know whether I'm coming or going, because I don't know what the expectations are anymore. I don't know who I am because of the way I was brought up. And now this says that was the wrong way and there needs to be this other way. That's part of that fear. That's part of this thing that scares me or gives me the willy-jillies. You see, I'm okay with some latitude, but I have to tell you, for goodness sakes, there are no absolutes anymore. My grandfather once told me that absolutes were absolutely not there, and that was a long time ago. What he meant by that is there's always going to be an interpretation of the rules. And in those 12 points that I was talking about to begin with from that other organization, there was a thing in there. It said if you didn't like the way things were going, you didn't like the rules, you thought they were wrong, you were to take and go and try to change them using the methods of which were common at that time. You see, that's different than throwing rocks and bottles. That's different than somebody just laying a lot of money on it. That's the point. You see, everything today seems to be open to the whims of those with the loudest voices. That is a scary proposition, because normally that's a few people who are now changing things, sometimes not for the better, for the majority. And as I travel around the country, I find this silent majority that we once talked about, they're just tired of playing the game. And so they've allowed this to happen. Now they're awakening. They're awakening and saying, hey, wait a minute. We have to do something. Here we have 2 or 3 generations of people who feel that everything is owed to them and everything should be given to them for free. And you don't have to work hard. You don't have to take and break a sweat. You don't have to take and do those things. You don't have to get calluses on your hands. My goodness, we have a problem. But what scares me the most, I think what really, really scares me the most, is the all-compromising of values. I was with a person here just this last week. And she had really had her head screwed on straight. What she said is because we have compromised so much that now we stand for nothing. That anything's okay. Everything's all right. 10 Commandments don't apply. All the 12 points don't apply. Nothing applies. Just do whatever you want to do, and we'll see how it shakes out. And this compromising of our values is what's tearing our organizations and our churches and our families apart. When I started today's program, I started talking about fear, because I'd gone and listened to a person talk about his whole message on fear on Sunday morning. And I went home and I put a lot of thought process into it. And really, I went out and started doing some investigating and just asking people, what do you fear? The biggest one was fear of failure, which I quite frankly, failure is the only way, it's the best way to learn. You see, failure is a positive word, not a negative word. My grandfather once told me the more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more you go. And the more you go, the more you can share with those around you. He had this little thing at the end. If you learn from your failures, they become the most positive piece in your life. That's a piece that I think that we're not telling people. We're not sharing with them. So what do you fear? Do you fear that the world is going to come to an end? Do you fear that your spouse is going to leave you? Do you fear your job will come to an end? Do you fear that there'll be no more popsicles? What is it that you fear? The popsicle thing came from my granddaughter, by the way. That was a big fear of hers. There would be no more in the freezer for her. But think about it. We as adults plant most of those fears in those around us, our young people included. Fear to ride a bicycle. Fear to put on a pair of skates. Fear to go on a hike. Fear to go camping. There's all these fears. And once they're faced, we're moving on. I can't remember as a young person having any of those fears. When I was a young person, we lived on a dead-end street, and the only thing back there was the swamp. And we used to run through the swamp in a pair of cut-off blue jeans, no shirt, no socks, no shoes, just blazing through the palmetto bushes. Fear. Fear is implanted by those around us. Now, I probably won't be running around those palmetto bushes, barefoot and a pair of shorts in my age. First of all, I don't run very fast anymore. But I'm a little smarter. But I still don't fear being out there. Now, sometimes I do fear driving on the road. And that's usually because I find people who have never had any expertise or training in the word called driving. I was very fortunate. I learned how to drive on the racetrack. Figure 8 racetrack, and there's no better place because, you're going to get hit sooner or later. Now, fear. Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaders. As leaders, we have a responsibility to help those around us not live in fear. If you hear this in your daily work effort and someone says that they're in fear of their job, talk to them. Are they really in fear of their job? Is it because they're not doing their job, or is it because they're going to have to be some layoffs or cutbacks? And if so, what are you doing about it, leader? Are you helping them find something new? Are you putting the time in so they're not so fearful? What are you doing? You see, leaders have a responsibility to remove fear from the people they work with and around. I hope I've helped you look at fear and you've listened to what kind of scares me. But I am concerned. I'm concerned because the leaders in our organizations, both for-profit and non-profit, in our churches, and the leaders in our homes, are spreading this type of fear that paralyzes those who are listening. I learned a long time ago that people do what people see, and people repeat what people hear. That can be a positive and it can be a negative. If all they hear is negative from you, if all they see is that you're not accountable for your actions, you as the leader become who they pattern themselves out. If you've ever been in a stockyard or if you've ever been anywhere around animals, the leader sets the tone. The leader that makes everyone afraid, fearful, scared, or the leader shows that, hey, it's going to be okay. We're in this situation, but we can work our way out. That's the difference. Now, I've since gone to another location and listened to another person speak. It's something I do. I love to listen to different people speak on Sunday morning. It's where I gather a lot of information of what's going on in today's world, especially by interviewing people after the service and talking to them as they walk out of the pews. There again, it's something that I have always done. And I believe people look forward to hearing positive things about life when I'm there. You see, I'm that crazy person that you've talked to who always can find something good. Even if that's all he's heard is something negative, he's going to find something good to say about it. Now that is something we can do to remove the fear from folks around us. Let's talk about that for a minute. How can you and I, we as leaders, remove fear from our folks? Well, first of all, we need to listen. We need to listen to find out where that fear is and what it is, and then really face it. If it's a fear that, well, they've heard from someone else, they've heard in the grapevine, they've taken in through what they thought they heard, sit down and listen. Let them get it all out. Then you can have a smart discussion about why it's not fit to be feared. And if it's something you can do something about, you should. This is one of the things that I've always talked about in large organizations. Way back when I was working for a large organization, I'd only been there about, almost 10 years, I imagine. And they came through with a project that they said they were going to do this leadership piece. And I had already started my journey on leadership training and instruction and learning. And so I raised my hand and said I'd love to be a part of it. They did the training, but it was I feel good, you feel good, we all feel so darn good. It did not have any meat to it. And the reason why, no one listened. The people who were putting it on didn't listen. They were just there to palaver and lay it out. They didn't listen. Great leaders listen first. And they really then be able to ask the great questions of why someone is fearful, why someone is scared. Leaders, that's our responsibility. I think responsibility goes right along with being afraid and scared. What is our responsibility? I think it goes right along with this compromising of your values. What is your responsibility? In an organization, I always encourage them to really get down on paper where everyone can know what the company's values are so that no one compromises them. And everything you do is look through those values so they're never compromised. But when the upper leaders start compromising to take and accept everything that happens, doesn't matter who does what, when, where, how, it's just we'll accept it all. That's when things start to go wackadoodle. And it's hard to bring them back. The one organization I was talking about a little while ago that had the 12 points was something I've spent my entire life on from the age of 8 until now. It's something I still believe in, but I've seen it now. I don't know if it'll ever regain a footing. I've seen the church of which I belong compromise its values. I'm not sure it'll ever regain its standing. People are always asking, why aren't people volunteering? Why aren't they getting involved with organizations? Why aren't they doing these things? If your organization is faltering, ask yourself the question, do we still have a set of values, and are we compromising our values? It's a tough world we're in. Everybody's asking us to compromise. Everybody's asked to accept everything. Everyone, it really is everybody. But people do what people see, and people repeat what people hear. And sooner or later, we are going to have to stand up. We, the leaders, the individuals, are going to have to stand up and say, enough's enough. These are my values. This is what we're living by. I can invite you in and I can invite you out. We must stand strong. We must stand up. And we must live our values. Now, my hope and dream is that you've really received a nugget of wisdom on today's program. If you have any questions or input, I encourage you, give me a call, 727-422-1833, 727-422-1833, or send me an email, dick@ewfw.org, dick@ewfw.org. Let me know what's going on. When your organization wants me to come and put on a leadership program, give a seminar, give a keynote, call me, send me an email, get on that calendar. Let's make it happen. This is so important to me that I would hope, and I really do hope, that it becomes important to all of you leaders listening and watching today. The things that we do for one another, it's how we do them, and it's when we do them. It's can we do enough. We need to teach more people how to fish instead of just giving them a fish. We need to listen to people so that they're understood and they can tell us where they're at and where they would like to go. And it's our responsibility, leaders, to make that happen. You see, this thing of fear and being afraid and being scared, leaders have a responsibility to help remove that, not place it. And if you hear those words you're coming out of your mouth and you think that they're coming out and that they're scaring people, do something about it for yourself. Stand up. Learn some new stuff. Call me. Get involved. We are here to help you. I see my time is just almost out. And so until next time, this is DW the Wrangler saying, ride hard, ride fast.